Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another wonderful episode of Sphere of Being, which is all about caring for those who care for others. Because you know what? Sometimes if we're carers, we could be caring for employees, we could be caring for teams, we might be having a child with superpowers, or a relative that's not very well, or indeed a partner or a loved one that perhaps needs special care at this time. It can be really easy to forget ourselves in the process and feel that we're burnt out, that we're unloved, that we really just don't know which way to turn. And in these podcasts, what we try and do is give you practical tips, make sure that you know that you're not on your own, that you can always reach out, that there are people who love and care about you, and that we can give you that warm hug over the internet and make sure that you know that you are so special, you are loved, and you are heard within our community. And today we have the most wonderful guest. It's Nirushka Kollopen, and she is just the most amazing, inspirational coach. She has had and suffered a great deal in her life from a young age and has come out to triumph, to be blessed, and has the biggest heart that I've come across in a very long time. Nirushka, it's lovely to have you. Welcome.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I feel super grateful to be here. So thank you.
Oh, it is lovely to have you here with us. And Nirushka, I'd love you to let our listeners know a little bit about your story from when you were a child and then what took you to be where you are now.
So thank you for that, Deborah. I've had a very difficult childhood and what seemed to be a very long, drawn out process. And I've come from, so I live in South Africa and I was raised in Johannesburg. My mom passed away at the age of 4, and it was my formative years and very difficult to have dealt with her passing. And throughout my childhood, I was raised with my dad and my sister. My grandmother raised us, but I was abused throughout my lifetime, and it was at the hands of my dad, which was very, very difficult. And I realized that I was going through life with this sense of disconnection, really feeling disconnected from myself. I had no sense of who I was. Everything on the outside was really loud, and I lived for other people and for outside circumstances. So very, very disconnected from myself. I had no awareness of who I was, really. And I found these repeating patterns over my lifetime. So I would have very abusive relationships that were all had their foundations in abuse and trauma. And I would have burnout throughout my career and my jobs. And I suffered from intense PTSD, anxiety, and depression. I had eating disorders, and truly, I was a mess. Really, it was really difficult to find a foundation in my life, and I was going from one thing to another, but not really having a sense of being grounded within myself. Um, and I tried many different therapies. I tried plant medicines to sort of help me gain an understanding of myself and what I was experiencing. And that took many years. And I found myself seeking, and I was seeking outside advice, something really like an anchor in life. But what really transformed me was the minute I started actually listening to myself. And that happened roughly 4 years ago. And I was getting closer to actually, my inner being and listening to my inner voice. And when I got to that place, it was like everything that was noise around me just dissolved. And for the first time, I found what it was like to be with myself and hear my own truth, and feel those feelings and sensations of anxiety, which I had felt like a buzz in my body. And I describe it as a buzz, almost like static in my body. But I felt those sensations just dissolve. And from there, this abounding clarity started coming through. And the clarity was really my own voice and my own inner wisdom. And I realized that my gift was to actually help other people. And so I started doing that in 2021, 2022. I formalized it. But that's when I realized this is the work that I've come to do, because I had to sort of figure out the map to getting to this place. And so I created my brand and my business.
Wow. You say that very eloquently, and the pain that you would have gone through and the suffering to be able to get to each stage in your journey and to come to where you are now with an open heart and a compassionate mindset is truly remarkable. So thank you, Nirushka, for being so open and so honest and so transparent with us, because I'm sure that your story resonates, as it does with me, with a lot of our listeners. It might not be ourselves, we could know of people who've gone through this situation. How do you think that before you became aware of yourself and how you then stepped into the new version of you, the new reality of who you are, your new truth, what was happening before you got to that point in your life?
Mhm. So what was happening internally?
And also, very good point, internally, and what were you seeing externally?
Mm. So externally, I'm taking career as one thing. I would go from one corporate job to the next, and I would suffer from burnout. And I just found life very overwhelming because my emotions were really loud and overwhelming. So with work, I found it very difficult to actually find work that really resonated with me, or where I felt like, oh, this is the thing I want to do. You know, a job for me was just getting by at that point, and it was just a way to earn an income. But there were moments where I sat at my desk and I would look outside through the window and just feel like, man, what am I doing here? You know, I spend 8 hours of my day here, but I'm not connected to what I'm doing. And I walk in feeling drained, and then I leave feeling drained. And I felt the sense of there must be more to life than this. There has to be more to life than this. And that feeling of there must be more to life than this just permeated every other area of my life, my relationships. So I realized later on that I was addicted to people. And I mean, other people have addictions, you know, to substances or to video games or to smoking. My addiction was to people, and specifically being in relationship. I realized I got this feeling from relationship that I was really looking for, and it was that feeling of warmth and safety with another human being, being able to feel held and loved. But I would chase it, and realize it was completely illusory, because every relationship I would get into would be devastating, and it would all end the same way. It would end with me um, being in pain, feeling completely disconnected. And there would be this element of abuse in all of my relationships. And I was very much part of the dynamic. And I realized that, you know, it takes two to actually create that dynamic. And I was recreating in all my relationships these feelings of instability, unsafety, and adding to the abuse, in my view, which is really, really difficult. And I grappled with that for a long time, because what I learned throughout having these relationships is that love is not safe. But I was also using the relationships to affirm that actually love isn't safe. So creating that whole loop and that whole dynamic in love.
Actually, Nirushka,
And,
you've touched upon a very good point that I'd just
mm,
like to expand on. I'm not condoning any abuse from anybody
mm,
to another person. And you've mentioned something that I just want to make completely clear that our listeners understand,
mhm,
that abuse is not acceptable.
mhm,
But what do you think you were doing or acting and behaving in a certain way that was allowing this abuse to manifest?
mhm. Thank you for that, Deborah. And absolutely, abuse should not in any way be condoned. But what I was realizing is that I was coming from my unhealed child self. So still expecting the partner or the person that I was with to be my source of love, to give me the love that I never got from my dad. And essentially, I was trying to look for dad throughout my lifetime with these men who, were abusive with me. And that was my idea of love. So I was recreating this blueprint, essentially, of love. And the blueprint I got from my dad, which was, love is I'll beat you and you have to apologize to me, or I will treat you terribly and it will be all your fault. And so I was looking for men who had the same traits as my dad to play out the same dynamic. And at the end of, you know, those relationships, just feeling or having that feeling of disconnection being echoed back to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
very much identify with that. I think that people who listen to our podcasts understand that I was in an abusive, I had abusive childhood from both of my parents. And what feels safe and what I crave, and you're right to use the word addiction from my point of view, is that the, the strength of the calling to be with the people that inevitably would cause me pain and anguish was insanely strong.
Mm.
And I didn't realize until recently, you managed to see this younger than I did, that there was this pattern of addiction. And those people gravitated to me as much as I gravitated to them.
Mm.
And that I wonder now, if I'd have been a different person, they perhaps wouldn't have gravitated to me in the first place. If I'd have been a different person, I wouldn't necessarily gravitated to them. But interestingly enough, I'd like to ask you, now that you have done work on yourself and you have been able to modify and change and eradicate, in some perspectives, the behaviors that you are now displaying, what type of relationships are you forming, not necessarily from an intimate perspective, but
Mhm.
from those around you now? What's the difference that you can see as you are now as to the relationships that you had in the past?
I think the relationships that I'm forming now and the relationships I really seek out now, or attract rather than seek out, yeah, I find that, these people gravitate towards me as much as I gravitate towards them. But it's really founded in deep connection. My idea for connection, I think prior to being healthy, has been excitement and chaos, essentially. So someone would come into my space and they would put on all the bells and whistles, sort of seduce me, and that would feel very exciting for me without me actually really getting to know them, or allowing myself space to feel them out. Does this person really resonate with me? So I would just jump in and get hooked, or addicted. But the addiction was really the excitement, the adrenaline, all that anxiety. And now what I look for, because I'm connected to myself and I've got a very strong sense of who I am and what I've created safety for myself in my life. And safety for me is important. And what that feels like in other people is, so the deep connection. Can I actually drop all my expectations and just connect with you as a human being? Because now I can source my own needs. I can take care of loving me. So I don't really need you to love me, but I can deeply understand who you are. And because you're connected to yourself, you can deeply understand who I am. And then it becomes this beautiful reciprocal thing of, I nurture you and you nurture me. And so my relationships now are very much reciprocal, nurturing, and based in that deep sense of connection and care for one another.
Yes. And you use the word that people gravitate to you rather than you seeking them out, which is different. It feels to me like it's a much more calm, centered, peaceful approach to relationships than the quick heat and disruptive and frothy types of relationships that you had before.
Yeah, absolutely. I was speaking to a friend the other day, not the other day, it was actually a while back, and we were talking about love and what love is. And this is a long-term friend, and he said to me, Nirushka, love is actually just, it's normal, it's safety. You don't feel all the anxiety and all the crazy hormones. It's just a stillness and an ability to be with someone without all that excitement and drama. And I realized, oh, actually, yeah, my friendships feel like love. My connections now feel like love because we have safety. And there's safety there without the buzz of that anxiety and drama. So all my relationships prior to now were all based in drama, and I would be totally excited by the drama and by the noise.
Yes. And from my point of view, I always worried about the fact that if I didn't feel like that, it would be kind of boring. And actually, now coming through from the other side, from the different lens and the different perspective, that's that peaceful inner calm that you get when you're with those people that resonate with that with you as well, is deeply fulfilling. And it feels safe because not necessarily I know what to expect, but that I know what happens will be seated from a loving and compassionate place from that other person. And that makes a big difference for being able to, because I had immense trust issues, which probably people could empathize with, and knowing that now I can give from that solid base of myself without feeling that I have anything to lose by giving, if that makes sense. Giving without the need for validation And if somebody turns around and doesn't do what I expect, in the sense that they come back and they're not meeting that with the same love and the same compassion that I get with them, that's okay, because I love myself and I'm not trying to find that love from somebody else. Because, like you said, you're very comfortable and confident and loving of yourself and compassionate of yourself. And I think that's a huge part, for me anyway, of getting out there and thinking that's the basis that I now use for my relationships. And it certainly wasn't the case before. So very, very interesting. What I'd like to go and delve into more detail now are the types of client that you have and how your work actually can help them.
So I work with predominantly women at this point, and women who have been through abuse, and they're struggling with eating disorders or PTSD or autoimmune and depression. And it's given me so much pleasure to actually be able to hold a space for them, because it's, women like this also have that sense of disconnection, or maybe feeling that it's really uncomfortable to sit with their trauma and the things that have happened to them in the past. And those stories are still playing out, not only in the external reality, but within themselves as well. And I think what I do is really just hold a space for them where they can actually explore themselves and go deeper into unpeeling all those layers. I had to learn how to work with the emotional body and the sensations through my own body, and through doing that, I've been able to understand the intensity that people coming from trauma actually experience within their bodies. And that on its own can be so overwhelming. You're just trying to cope with yourself at this point, let alone what's happening in your external reality, but just learning to cope with yourself. So for me, being able to hold that space for people and make it safe to say, you know what, these things have happened. And we can talk about them, and you can explore this. And it's truly safe to be able to explore this as you move deeper with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what is happening in the lives of the clients that you're helping as a result of you holding that space for them?
So what I found about the work that I do, I don't just work through, talking with people, but it's energetic work that I do as well. And I feel into the layers of what someone's actually holding within their body and in their field. And we move through each layer. And what I've realized is through holding that space, it makes it so much easier for someone to drop into those layers and explore them and actually start releasing them through having a release of emotion, whether that be, crying or rage coming up. I found, especially with women, there's almost this disconnect that they have with their anger and with their rage. And I can relate to that, because that was my story, being abused. You're taught, well, it's not okay to be angry, and you silence that voice of anger. And I find that with people struggling with these issues, that it's actually the anger that they need to acknowledge within themselves and tap into. And through tapping into that anger, they have that release and realize, actually, this was not okay. This was not okay with me. And that creates the healing space where they have that awareness. And from that awareness, they can slowly, move up the chain of awareness and realize, okay, from this space, I have a broader perception of things. But it's
Mm,
really just allowing them to experience each layer as they move through it.
mm. You've touched upon something about having a broader perspective. And that's something that resonates with me because I think that sometimes we can become, or I know I have become in the past, very narrow in my focus with
Mhm.
how I navigated my life. And it became so constricting. It imploded at the age of 57 and I had the breakdown. Um, what do people tell you of their experiences as they are now embarking on the journey with you as a result of what you're doing and how they're working with you?
People have, said that this is transformational for them and that it's shifted them in many ways, not only externally, but how they relate to themselves as well. And realizing that these sensations that come up are not going to devastate them, that it's actually okay to feel what they're feeling and to be with them completely because they're bigger than the emotions, they're bigger than their circumstances. And I think that's been the shift in perspective for these women.
Wonderful. To be able to step into their power. Fabulous.
Mhm.
You're doing a great job. Well done, Nirushka. Flying the
Thank you.
flag. Um, as we come towards the end of this episode, and it has been a joy to listen to your wonderful work and what you're doing there, the value that you're creating. I'd love to know from you, what does caring for others mean to you?
I realized that people want to be listened to and they want they want to be heard. And for me, it's so important because holding a space means listening. And it doesn't mean just listening for content, for words, for what someone's saying. It's really tuning into their body language. How are they saying that? What's the energy that's actually coming from them? What are they? I mean, someone can tell you their experience from, just using their words, but they could be holding back a whole lot through the way they sit or the way they hold themselves. So it's really tuning into what someone is saying and allowing the story to actually come out and just being present with them and being present with their story. And for me, presence is bringing my entire being to what is coming through and what is being said and the underlying messages of what's actually coming through them.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that piece, I think, is coming across very strongly from you. That piece and that listening to understand, be able to apply that understanding to provide the help and the support, but holding that space. And I think it's also important to hold space within ourselves on a
Mhm.
daily basis to allow ourselves that compassion to expand within, because what we perceive inside is usually borne out in the outer world as well, so that we see what's going on inside, it's manifested externally. And the more peaceful we are inside, usually it's lovely to think that our world actually then becomes a more peaceful, blissful place to be as well, which is great. I'm sure you've resonated with a lot of people that have been listening. Nirushka, how can people get hold of you?
So if you'd like to go to my website, you can find me at nirushka.com. That's nirushka.com. Or you can send me an email at hello@nirushka.com.
Ah, wonderful. And they'll also be on the show notes as well for people. And Nirushka, it's been a real privilege to have you on the show. And may you continue to do such wonderful work with your clients. It's fantastic and worthwhile, very valuable work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you for inviting me, and it was lovely to chat with you.
Oh, Thank you. Thank you so much. And everybody, it's been lovely to have you with us. And please do come again. And we're here to support. As I say, let's make sure that we spend a little time giving ourselves the love and the care that we all deserve. We're all fantastic. You're all amazing. You have all the support and the love in the world from myself and Nirushka today. So have a great time until we see you again. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.